What's up, wizards and cowabunga mofos? Today we got the official reveal of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles set at New York Comicon, something that we all knew was going to happen anyway. I mean, most of the community had already called this a couple of months ago, but Thursday we started seeing people snapping pictures of the TMNT van with the MTG logo on it rolling down the streets in New York City. We knew it was basically done and dusted at that point, and on Friday afternoon we got a bunch of new cards, not just from the standard set, but also from the one commander deck that they're putting out for this set. We're going to look at all of them, standard cards first, of course, and talk about how cool these are. And some of them are. I know not everyone's going to be into the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Secret Lair. I am, but even if you aren't, there's some really nice cards in this thing. So let's go ahead and kick things off. We got a lot to look at, and the first thing we need to check out is a brand new mechanic, asterisk, next to the term brand new, because we kind of just got a reworking of ninjutsu. A lot of people, myself included, figured they'd just throw ninjutsu into the set and call it a day, but they've continued their trend of doing ninjutsu with extra steps in this set. But it's kind of all good. It looks like this reworking makes it to where we can play basically any card type with ninjutsu, which I kind of like. So let's take a look at the sneak mechanic here on Raphael's Technique. Now, first of all, just to ease some of your potential fears here, don't worry, Raph and the rest of the turtles do not look like this on every single card. This is 6 mana, 4 and 2 red for an instant, with Sneak for 2 and a red. You may cast this spell for 2 and a red if you also return an unblocked attacker you control to hand during the Declare Blocker's step. Each player may discard their hand and draw 7 cards. So kind of a Wheel of Fortune with a bunch of extra steps, but there's some good things about this. It's an instant, unlike most wheel effects, so you can just cast it during your opponent's turn sometime. You'll never be able to sneak it during their turn, but for 6 mana during their end step or something, at least like you get to untap and use your fresh hand immediately, which again, like most wheel effects won't do for you. So I do like that, but there's a few things I don't like about it. Like the sneak ability, like it looks really good. Like it looks like it's just going to draw you a fresh 7 when you're out of cards in your hand, but you have to sneak a creature back to your hand, and then the spell finishes resolving. So at that point, you'll definitely have to discard whatever creature you popped back to your hand in the first place, and that could be a massive problem. But at the same time, it could also just draw you like 6 cards. And even if you had a couple of cards in your hand you don't mind pitching, it's still going to draw you like effectively 4 or 5 cards. And that's really good in a lot of decks. It looks actually kind of good in aggro, right? You're going to have unblocked creatures in that deck. You're trying to get aggressive anyway. You want a fresh hand because you're dumping your hand so quick. But that said, I don't think this goes in any currently extant standard deck that plays red aggro cards, right? Like we have a mono red aggro deck that might be like the second best deck in the format. Absolutely does not play this card. So I'm just not sure where this goes. It actually seems like it might fit more in a mid-range deck than anything else. And in mid-range decks, you might have to pitch a couple of cards to it, but also in mid-range decks with like synergy and card draw engines and stuff like that, you might have ways of reanimating the creatures, flashing them back, you know, enabling mayhem or something like that. So maybe in a mid-range deck it goes, but I'm just not really sure where you'd actually fit a wheel effect like this in standard right now, even though it does look like reasonably powerful. Well, let's go ahead and move on to Turtles Forever here. Good job on the art by Devin L. Kurtz. You know, I imagine that a commission was a nightmare. Like, oh, you want me to draw them all in like every style they've ever come in? Okay, yeah, I guess I'm an artist. I'll give it a shot. You know what I mean? But anyway, Turtles Forever is 4 mana, 3 and a white for an instant. Search your library and or outside the game for exactly 4 legendary creature cards you own with different names. Reveal those cards and an opponent chooses 2 of them. Put the chosen cards into your hand and shuffle the rest into your library. So I guess it's supposed to remind you of a Gifts Ungiven, so we'll call it Gifts Amphibian. Is that the worst joke in the history of the channel? I think it's in the top 5. Anyway, this is a massively neutered Gifts Ungiven for what it's worth. And I think it's kind of worth an awful lot in this case. This only goes and gets legendary creatures, but it's worth noting you can go and get them from outside the game, i.e. your sideboard in competitive 60 card environments. And that might be pretty good depending on what you're packing, but at the same time, are you really going to sacrifice like up to 4 sideboard slots for legendary creatures that work with this card? Maybe there's a few, you know, people play Surak in sideboards right now. So like maybe if you're going to use those slots for legendary dudes anyway, then like a card like this could work. But another way in which they kind of destroyed all the good things about Gifts Ungiven is that the cards get shuffled back into your library that you don't end up picking here, which is just super lame. Like if they went into your graveyard or something, we might actually be talking for like reanimation purposes and stuff like that. But you can't even do that with this card. You just get the 2 worst legends that you chose because your opponent gets to choose the ones you get. So they choose the 2 worst ones and you get those. And that's the card. You draw 2 legendary creatures for 4 mana, but it is instant speed. And just like the first card we looked at, I think that instant speed really helps this card out an awful lot, especially since you can cast it on your opponent's end step, but you can cast it on your opponent's combat step and maybe go get flash creatures or something with it. There's a few different options a card like this presents, but at the same time as 4 mana, and all it does is get legendary dudes, and your opponent gets a lot of choice in the matter, and I'm just not sure at the end of the day that's going to be a super strong Magic card. But speaking of super, let's take a look at Super Shredder over here. This is 2 mana, 1 on a black for a 1/1 legendary mutant ninja human with menace. Whenever another permanent leaves the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Super Shredder. You guys remember when I freaked out a little bit about Gixie and Infiltrator? Getting kind of the same vibes with this one. I'm not sure this card actually ends up doing too much, and it's also mythic, which I'm not sure is worth it, but at the same time, this says leaves the battlefield rather than you sacrifice a thing like Gixie and Infiltrator. And it doesn't even say dies or something like that on it. It's just whenever a thing leaves the battlefield like ever. So this could be halfway decent in like Pixie decks and Standard. It's only a couple of mana. Even though you're never targeting this with Pixie, you're targeting everything else. So a lot of stuff is leaving the battlefield because it's bouncing back to your hand. Shredder could get really big. In like mono black and, black-green decks and stuff like that, you're playing a fair amount of removals, so just by blowing creatures away, Shredder's getting a little bit larger, but Bounce makes him grow, Flicker, like Blink effects, make him grow, right? Exile effects will make him grow. If somebody sacrifices a map or a different kind of token, there's another one in this set. You've got like 8 different artifact tokens, it feels like. I think that's a little bit hyperbole. But we have a few different artifact types in Standard that you can sacrifice right now. And whenever any of those go to the graveyard or leave the battlefield for any reason, suddenly Shredder grows. So I think that things are leaving the battlefield more often than you might assume, just like a fetch land, like a Fabled Passage gets cracked, +1/+1 counter on Shredder. And that might be really good with like Ice Till Explorer, bringing the Fabled Passage back every turn, cracking it, bring it back again, crack it. Well, that's like 2 +1/+1 counters on Shreds every turn. So that seems like it could be a decent little, I was going to say combo, but really just synergy, There's a few things that can make this grow, not just reliably, but also really big, really quickly. But at that point, you might be building more or less your whole deck around it. And I'm not sure that you really need to be doing that with a card like this. But all things considered, I think it's like the best version of Gixie and Infiltrator. And even though I got burned by that card, I still have a little bit of excitement in my cockles for this. That's a real word. In the depths of my heart for a card like this. But it would have helped a lot in terms of like my excitement level if this guy started life as a 2/2, but we're just paying 2 mana for a 1/1. Like, sure, he's got Menace, which I guess he would. He seems like a pretty scary looking guy, but I wish it was Trample instead of Menace or something. But I don't know. I can't fault the card too much. I've heard people talk about it seeing play in Modern because there's fetch lands in Modern and stuff, and I'm just not really sure that it's quite there, but I'm willing to be wrong about this. Super Shredder's awesome. But let's keep pushing and look at Leonardo's Sewer Samurai here. A little TMNT 3 stuff going on. This is 4 mana, 3 into white for a 3/3 legendary Mutant Ninja Turtle Samurai. 4 creature types. Wow. This also has Sneak for the same mana value, but a different mana cost. Usually the mana cost is 3 and a white. The mana cost for sneaking it is 2 in double white. This has double strike. Remember that. And during your turn, you may cast creature spells with power or toughness 1 or less from your graveyard. If you cast a spell this way, that creature enters with a finality counter on it. Okay, so the first thing I want to address is the Reddit argument as to whether or not this comes into play tapped and attacking when you sneak it in. I've seen a bunch of people make the argument like, well, it wouldn't make any sense if it didn't come into play tapped and attacking. But the reminder text on Raphael's technique doesn't say anything about if it's a creature, it enters play tapped and attack. It doesn't say that at all. So I don't know that it does work that way. I think you might just put it into play untapped and not attacking. I think that might be what's happening here. Either way, I kind of like the text on this. Right? It's not bad. A lot of creatures have power or toughness 1, right? If you've got a 1/5 in the yard, this can bring it out. If you've got a 7/1 in the graveyard, this can bring it out as well. So I think that's actually really good. Maybe Aristocrats decks could use something like this. I could see it happening, but it does kind of cut off combo lines. The fact that the creatures get finality counters kind of sucks, but it still seems like it could be like fine in like the top end of an aggro deck or something like that. I'm just not sure that there's any real like white weenie deck in Standard that's really going to try to leverage this above some other 4-drops they could play, or just not play 4-drops in the first place. So I don't know, man. In some ways, it reminds me of the Angel that we just lost that allows you to like recast one thing out of your yard, convert a mana cost 3 or less every turn, but it's probably worse in most cases than that card was. And that card did see some sparing play, but mostly because it can get like Field of Ruins out of your yard, and this can't even do that. So I'm not super convinced. I've heard some people say it might be a cool commander if you build your deck around it right, and maybe, but you're restricted to mono white and maybe not the absolute best creatures in the world. So altogether I have my doubts, but I always like a little bit of, not necessarily a card draw engine, but definitely a way to get around sweepers in the late game and rebuild your board state, right? You can cast multiple things out of your yard every turn. There's no once per turn limit or anything. So if you have enough mana, you can just kind of go wild. And if you untap with this guy in play, well then yeah, suddenly he's kind of like casting like a Raise the Past or something if you have the right things in your yard. So cool things about Leo for sure. And I like the design, all things considered, but again, I'm not sure that Sneak works the way everybody wants it to. And a 4-mana 3/3 double strike might not be as good as it seems, especially if you're not getting in with ninjutsu and hitting for 6 like immediately, no questions asked. So again, I got some foibles with this guy, but altogether the design is cool. But it's time to look at the uncommon from today. This is Casey Jones, Jury Rig Justiciar. I don't know what that means. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 2/1 legendary human berserker with haste. When Casey Jones enters, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact card from among them, put them into your hand, the rest go on the bottom in a random order. So this is not the first dude that we've seen like this. 2-drop creatures that dig 4 for an artifact or some number for an artifact are actually reasonably common. I think it all started with Glint Nest Crane. We've gotten 2 or 3 more since then, but Casey might be the best one. He's just a 2-mana, 2-power haste guy, which is already like not playable in and of itself. But if a 2-power, 2-mana haste guy does something good enough on top of that stat line, then he's usually somewhat playable. And this will at least get a card for you. Sometimes pick up a chainsaw or something in your Artifacts Matter deck, and I think that's pretty cool. But again, I'm not sure that this is quite at the level it needs to be to see play again in like these mono red decks. I mean, what is it digging for in mono red right now? And like what, blue red artifact deck really wants this? You know what I mean? Like let's say you're playing Pinnacle Emissary at the top end of your curve in a very low to the ground blue-red artifacts deck. This seems like a perfect 2-drop, but probably not. You actually want most of your deck to be artifacts in that case. I think maybe it makes the grade, but altogether I'm just not too sure about Casey, but I can't deny that cards like this have seen play in the past, and one that is effectively the correct stat line for the mana cost, might be even better than some of the other kind of underpowered variants. Underpowered because they draw an artifact for you. But Casey just kind of puts it all out there, you know what I mean? Like he's got the right stat line, pretty aggressive dude. You don't mind playing him in your aggro deck, and he draws you a card. And that could be fantastic. Also, Casey's like my second favorite guy in TMNT. Like of all the things in TMNT, I think Casey might be my second favorite. But my first favorite of all the guys in TMNT is Bebop and Rocksteady. I'm actually had to wear my Bebop and Rocksteady shirt for this today. And we got a pretty good card for them. And they do count as one guy, by the way. They are TV's favorite couple. I love Bebop and Rocksteady so much. And I'm actually pretty glad that they got a nice little piece of cardboard here. So let's take a look at simply Bebop and Rocksteady. They don't need any kind of special titles. We're just here to smash. Anyway, Bebop and Rocksteady is 3 mana, 1 and 2 Gruul hybrids for a 7 freaking 5. It's a pretty good stat line for the mana that you're actually paying for it. Now, the downside here on this legendary Boar Rhino mutant is that whenever Bebop and Rocksteady attack or block, sacrifice a permanent unless you discard a card. Kind of nice how this works with Super Shredder, like you sacrifice a thing and Super Shredder gets a little bit bigger. That's kind of nice, but there's going to be times where you don't really mind sacrificing a creature, right? Like this might go kind of well in the Sephiroth builds. If you want a huge guy, that's not bad, but I guess the problem with Bebop and Rock is that they don't have any real keyword ability. Like if they had Trample, that would be gross, but as it stands, they just kind of remind me of a Rotting Reggie. And that's good territory to be in. But really where this goes well is Reanimator decks. I feel like a broken record. Like every Universes Beyond set from now on is apparently going to include a 3 mana overstated legendary boy that allows you to reanimate stuff really easily. Last time it was Ultimate Green Goblin, which I still think is a really good Magic card. And this time, it's old B&R over here, baby. This will allow you to discard cards. So that's good with Mayhem for what it's worth. You can Mayhem in your Ultimate Green Goblin. They actually seem to go really well together, and I like that. But, you can discard whatever you want and then reanimate it back or Mayhem it in or, flashback a thing or whatever you want. This helps you work into your graveyard really nicely in a way that I like. Sometimes a deck like this is going to need big overstated boys to bridge the gap and attack and block for you and just be a solid threat even if your reanimation plan doesn't go off. And just like Rotting Regisaur, again, this card reminds me a lot of that card. This does that very well. It's also one of the best, power to mana cost ratios and standards, so it's worth noting that it works really well with crew, right? But especially station. Most of the planet lands you can get stationed up in just 2 taps of Bebop and Rocksteady. Even just 1 tap will take you more than half of the way there, so might be pretty decent for getting those going too. It just kind of looks like it has a good bit to do in standard, and 3 mana is not too much to ask for an ability like this, especially in colors that don't mind it. But getting into some of the better stuff from the standard set that we got to see today, let's take a look at our first April from the set. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a bunch of different versions of every character in this set. Like a little mini Spider-Man, but every card isn't Spider-Man. We just get 4 splinters. I think that's going to happen here. So let's take a look at our first April. April O'Neil Hacktivist is 4 mana, 3 and a blue for a 1/5 legendary human scientist. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card for each card type among spells you've cast this turn. Now, to be honest, I don't know what this does in standard. I really don't. It's 4 mana for a 1 power creature, and that is probably not a good enough threat for 4 mana in most decks. But the turn that you play it, it's going to draw you at least 1 card. Even if you used all your mana on it, you cast a creature spell that turn, so you're drawing a card if she survives. It's also kind of tough to take out 5 toughness creatures, although not impossible in standard. It can be a little bit difficult for some decks. I kind of like that about it too, but all things considered, if you untap with it and play an instant and a creature, or an instant and a planeswalker, or a sorcery and a creature, or whatever it is, an artifact, then suddenly it draws 2 cards at the end of that turn. And I will note too that the more cards it draws, the more easy it is to, on subsequent turns, play more card types. So it kind of synergizes with itself. If there's ever a turn where it draws 3 cards or something, then that is more card types for you to play next turn, thus drawing more cards. So I kind of like the way that it, snowballs. I don't know if that's the right term, but again, it works with itself in a way that isn't super self-evident at first glance. And I kind of like that. But to me, Krang is the most powerful card that we saw today by a little bit. I think this could go in competitive environments beyond just standard, but let's take a look at this thing real quick. This is 8 mana, sort of. 6 and 2 blue for a 1/4 legendary artifact creature, Ultram Warrior. Let's go. This also, however, has affinity for artifacts, so you're really hoping to cast this for just 2 or 3 mana at most. When Krang enters, if you have fewer than 4 cards in your hand, draw cards equal to the difference, and Krang gets +1/+0 for each other artifact you control. So if you got the full discount on this and played it for just 2 blue mana, he is a 7/4 that draws 3/4 cards. It's really good, man. I think there are artifact aggro decks and standard blue-white artifact aggro specifically that might totally want this card. As a matter of fact, I think that deck might have been waiting for this card the whole time. The deck with Zoetic Glyph and things like Novice Inspector that make artifacts rather than being artifacts themselves. But, it also gets to play Mendicant Core and a bunch of other really good artifacts, so and Duskrose Reliquary and stuff. That deck is already kind of nice, but it really lacked that kind of late game refill and a late game I'm going to win the game with a huge guy now, Mendicant Core was really the only actual option for that deck, but now it has 2 creatures like Mendicant Core in terms of power and toughness, but it's also got a big refill in the late game, which is super duper important, and that deck makes enough little tokens and casts enough small artifacts that I think it's reasonably easy to get this card on turn 4, push your refill, and have a big threat. Similarly, I've heard it talked about on Reddit in the Simulacrum Synthesizer deck, another deck that could use a card draw piece. I could see playing this over even United Battlefront, even though Battlefront is pretty good in that deck. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a fine piece. I still think that a card that just draws you 4 and is huge and always triggers Synthesizer, that's all amazing 2, so I will say the synthesizer deck doesn't necessarily need a big threat to win in the late game. That's kind of all they do, but they do need a refill on this level, and you'd be surprised how quickly the synthesizer deck can get relatively low on cards too. I don't think it's going to be a straight up refill draw 4 in those decks the way it often will be in the artifact aggro decks that dump their hand so quick, but I still don't think that that deck is going to mind drawing 2. Now when you get out of standard, there are cards kind of a little bit like this that already exist, like Thought Monitor is a modern playable affinity card, and that usually only costs 1 mana to cast, so I think it might just be better than Krang, all things considered, but that draws a couple of cards, and in affinity, it's very easy to dump your hand completely to 0, so the extra cards that Krang draws you might be well worth it, especially considering in affinity, when it draws you cards, it's going to draw a bunch of cards that also have affinity. So, like, you know, you play this for 2 mana, and then you play, like, every card it drew you for a grand total of 3 mana. That should be okay too. And for what it's worth, I guess I like it in Commander too. Like in anything artifact focused, I really, really like this in Commander, but I'm not really going to talk too much about Commander yet. We're about to go into Commander. Don't worry. Every card in the video from here on out is almost every card. It's Commander, but still, I think that in Commander this is good, but I'm mostly worried about like 60 card formats here. I think this might be exactly what a deck in Standard has been waiting for this whole time, but we'll see. I guess there is one more Standard legal thing that I need to address before I get on to the Commander stuff that was previewed today, and I guess that's the basic lands. These things have caused more discourse than any other cards previewed today, which is insane to me. They're freaking basic lands, but no one will shut up about these. I do not get it. Yes, probably would have worked better as food tokens. I think we can all agree that that is the case, but they just did like New York lands for the Spider-Man set. They probably should have thought of that before. That's probably on them. Still, I think this is an interesting workaround. You know, I don't hate it necessarily, and I think a lot of people probably will. To the point that I've seen a lot of folks just already openly wondering if this is AI art or not, which first of all, I'm getting a little bit tired of. Just to be honest, I don't like AI like at all. I've never used it in my life. I don't plan on using it, and I don't like the idea of it whatsoever, and I think it's art stealing and blah, blah, blah. I think that all of those arguments are true. Not a big fan of AI, but at the same time, I'm kind of also tired of people every time they see art that they kind of just don't like or they don't vibe with or whatever, being like, is this AI? It's like, not everything you don't like is AI. But anyway, one thing I do like about this, and for what it's worth, this is artist Gabaleps, which has been working with Wizards since at least Phyrexia All Will Be One, maybe a little bit before, but they've done over 80 pieces of art for WOTC at this point. I don't think this is AI. I think this is Gabaleps trying to do a thing based on commissions that they were given. So good job, I guess. And it's even better once you realize whether this is part of the art commission from WOTC or Gabaleps snuck this in. All of them are actual pizza orders that the Turtles have made at some point. Like the island, for instance, this is a peanut butter base with anchovies and also onions, and that is an actual pizza that they have ordered on the show before, so nice touch. Same thing goes with the swamp, by the way. Mushrooms and licorice, they have ordered that before in the show. So I'm pretty sure every single one of these pizzas is a pizza they've ordered before, which again, I think is a nice, touch for fans of the franchise. But in any case, these don't bother me. If you want to play them, whatever. And if somebody plays them across the table from me in a Commander game, I'm not going to be like, you're playing the Pizza Lands. I'm out of here. I'm going to be like, Pizza Lands, sister, good job. Those look nice. Just be nice to people. How hard is it to be nice? Anyway, that's really all I have to say about these. They're not AI, and I'm fine with them. And I kind of like the idea that they're, a little bit like a tiny amount of fan service when you really get down to what actually makes up each pizza. I like them. Am I going to order any of them? No, probably not. I might open a few packs of TMNT, get a couple of them, be like, hey, it's a Pizza Land, and just like throw it in a box somewhere. These things will not really affect my life in any way, apart from this 2 minutes I have to take to talk about them right now, and that does not make me angry. But enough of that. We're going to move on to the Commander stuff to finish the video off, and I will get through some of this stuff faster. I have my reasons, but I should go ahead and tell you that we get one Commander deck and one Commander deck only for the TMNT set. It's called Turtle Power. What else? And it's all 5 colors thanks to its face commander. Its face commander is just Leonardo, which is weird because there is a commander already revealed in the Commander product that I think would have made a much better 5-color commander for this deck, but there is a special quirk to this Leonardo that allows you to have more than just him as your commander, so I guess I kind of see why they did this. But let's go ahead and take a look first at Leonardo the balance. This is 4 mana, 3 and a white for a legendary Mutant Ninja Turtle. This is a 3/3. Whenever a token you control enters, you may put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Do this only once each turn, womp womp. But if you pay Wooburg, all 5 colors on this activated ability, creatures you control gain Menace, Trample, and Lifelink until end of turn. There's one more ability on this. It's called Partner Character Select. You can have 2 commanders if both have this ability. So let's look at all the other creatures that have that ability, starting with Michelangelo the Heart. This is 2 mana, 1 on the green for a 2/1 legendary Mutant Ninja Turtle with Trample. And Raid the Fridge. At the beginning of your second main phase, if you attack this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and create a food token, and this has Partner Character Select. So if you want Leo to be your face, this guy can hang out with him in the command zone. There's a reason I pointed this guy out first of all these partner creatures. He's just kind of alright, although I guess I could see him going in Queen decks because of the end of turn. You get food token and a frog token. Hey, that's not bad. It works pretty nicely with things like Academy Manufacturer, because if you get a food token, now you get a bunch of different kinds of tokens, and that's kind of nice too. So Mikey works with some stuff, but maybe not as powerful as I'd like him to be. But that's the thing with partner commanders, is that they can afford to be a little bit less powerful. I just think that Michelangelo misses the mark by a little bit too much, all things considered. So I'll move on to Raphael the Muscle. This one's neat. 5 mana though, which is the only real downside on the card, is this relatively steep casting cost. 4 and a red for a 4/4 legendary Mutant Ninja Turtle. Double all damage that creatures you control with counters on them would deal. That is a line of text. Whenever Raphael enters, you get a mutagen token. This also has Partner Character Select. So what the heck is a mutagen token? It's actually really simple. I guess I'll go ahead and throw it on screen for you. But yeah, it's just a little artifact token. You can pay 1, sack it, a creature gets a +1/+1 counter. Could not be easier. This actually is nice. If we get a few of these cards in Standard that create mutagen tokens, it works well with Bebop and Rocksteady. Just sacrifice some mutagen tokens. Who cares? Yeah, there's a few things this could work with, like Krang, for instance, would work really well with a field full of mutagen tokens. So here's hoping we get a few cards in the Standard set that give us these tokens. But, you know, for what it's worth, I think that just the first line of text on Raphael, even at 5 mana, is a baller of a line of text. Man, this could end up in the 99 of a ton of decks, or just its own commander, and you might as well partner with something because it can, right? I just think that this might be an even better ability in some ways than Leonardo's ability, right? But I didn't talk too much about Leonardo back there, and all I should really say about him is that I think that he probably does have the best ability, all things considered, of all 4 of these turtles that have Partner Character Select. Being able to put +1/+1 counters on every creature you control just because a token came into play is already all right, but the activated ability for Wurburg is also incredible. That said, Raphael, kind of true to the cartoon, true to the comic books, and true to the movies, is kind of right there on the same level as Leonardo. It's very hard to tell which one is more powerful when you really get down to it. I think that double all the damage that creatures with counters on them would deal is just an insane line of text that could probably work all together in more commander decks than Leo can. But if you thought the Turtles were the only ones with Partner Character Select, you'd be wrong. You can also play Splinter as one of your partners. This is Splinter the Mentor, which you can easily make rhyme, right? Splinter the Mentor, come on. This is 2 mana, 1 and a black for a 2/2 legendary Mutant Ninja Rat with Menace. Whenever Splinter or another non-token creature you control leaves the battlefield, you get a mutagen token. It also has Partner Character Select, of course. So the stat line here and the keyword ability aren't exactly going to set the world on fire, but I imagine that there's ways to abuse the mutagen token. We see again leaves the battlefield, which I think is interesting. That Super Shredder costs 1 and a black, and he cares about things leaving the battlefield. Splinter costs 1 and a black, and he cares about things leaving the battlefield. And I don't think that's an accident flavor-wise. But my favorite of these Partner Character Select cards is Donatello the Brains, not because it's the most powerful, just because Donatello is my favorite thing about TMNT. Hands down. This is like 80% of the reason why I like this show and property is I love Donatello. He's one of my favorite guys to ever exist. Fiction or non-fiction, I love Donatello with all of my heart. This is 3 mana, 2 and a blue for a 2/4 legendary Mutant Ninja Turtle. If 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus a mutagen token are created instead, and this has Partner Character Select. A quick little Easter egg here before analysis, just something I've just now noticed a second ago, is that the bottom right TV on this card seems to be playing the original NES Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, and the top right TV appears to either be playing TMNT Arcade or TMNT 2, or perhaps Turtles in Time, one of those side-scrolling beat-em-up Turtles games. I'm pretty sure that's what Donnie's doing here, but Donnie's also just generally being pretty decent, you know? If you get any tokens, you also get a mutagen token. That's great. It's not restricted to like once a turn or anything like that. It is restricted to, you know, once per batch of tokens. So even if you get like 6 tokens, you're only getting 1 mutagen token in a batch, but that's still fine. There's lots of ways in mono blue even to get a bunch of tokens, but you don't have to play it in mono blue. This could be in the 99 of, you know, a 3-color deck, or again, you could partner this with something else to help jam another color in there, which I think is really cool. I was just building around Queena like 2 weeks ago. I'm still kind of building around Queena. I brought the card up in like 3 videos in the last week or so I apologize for that, but this kind of reminds me in some ways of a Queena, and would go really well in a Queena deck that's trying to make tokens anyway. So I kind of like abilities like this. I've already mentioned Academy Manufacturer in this video, which is going to put a ton of different kinds of tokens into play, but this kind of reminds me of Academy Manufacturer in that if you would get one kind of token, now you get a couple of different kinds of tokens instead, and I think that is actually pretty good. But believe it or not, there is a Donnie card that I don't like in this set. It's Donnie and April, a Dorkable Duo. This is 5 mana, 4 and a blue for a 3/3 legendary mutant ninja human turtle, another 4-creature type thing. When Donnie and April enter, choose one or both. Each mode must target a different player. Either target player draws 2 cards, and or target player returns an artifact, instant, or sorcery card from their graveyard to their hand. So I just don't know if this is enough value for 3 mana, especially considering you don't have to target another player. I want to throw that out there. The way the card is worded, you only have to choose one of these 2 modes and you can target yourself with that mode. So if you want to target one of your opponents for political reasons, or maybe even if you're in a team game, you can target somebody else at the table, the other person on your team. And then suddenly this doesn't seem so bad, but it's still a 5 mana 3/3, which I don't love, but it's a really good blink target. You know, you might be able to blink it, and then when it comes back into play, return the blink spell to your hand. And there might be reasons why you might want to do that. Or you might just draw 2. You know, kind of like a Mole Drifter in that way, 5 mana draw 2. On a body, sure, you know. So the card might be a little bit better than I'm giving it credit for, but I'm pretty sure Mole Drifter hasn't been Commander playable in like 7 years, so I don't know how good this is. Now, we did end up seeing a bunch of versions of the Turtles, not just Donnie and April, that don't have partner select. So we each kind of got one of those too. This is Michelangelo on the scene, for example, riding a little motor scooter. How adorable. 6 mana, 4 and 2 green for a 2/2 legendary human. Not a human at all. Mutant Ninja Turtle. Why did I anticipate a human? This guy has trample, and he enters with a +1/+1 counter on him for each land you control. When he dies, return to your hand. That's not bad. I mean, 6 mana is an awful lot for this, but it is a, like, I don't know, 8/8 trample that never actually dies. That could be good enough, I think. Matter of fact, this might be one of the better of all of these non-partner character select turtles, but that doesn't mean that some of them aren't good. Now, Michelangelo is a bit of a mana commitment, you know, if you want to recast him after he dies. He's 6 freaking mana, so like, it might be a problem, but it might not be at the same time. He's going to grow throughout the game. You know, the first time he dies, you play him again, and sure, it costs you a total of 12 mana to get him on the board both times you've done that, but now he's like an 11/11. So with trample, he's like a freaking Metalwork Colossus, but trample. That's great. But we'll also look at Leonardo, Worldly Warrior here. This is 8 mana, but not really. 7 and a white for a 5/5 legendary mutant ninja turtle. Nailed it that time. Never are they human. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature you control, and it has double strike. So this could be a 1 mana 5/5 double strike, but you'd have to have a whole bunch of boys on the table in order for him to actually be free. But if he's a 3 mana 5/5 double strike, we're starting to get there. At the same time, though, all he is a double strike guy. Like, he doesn't do anything besides be a double strike man. So I'm not sure how good that is, actually, in Commander. I think in Commander, you might have to actually do something. But we also got to see Donatello Rad Scientist over here, a whopping 6 mana and no way to decrease that casting cost. Note that a lot of these, like, non-partner ones are pretty expensive to cast. This is 5 and a blue for a 5/6 legendary mutant ninja turtle with vigilance. When it enters, tap up to 3 target creatures your opponents control and put a stun counter on each of them. Speaking of Donatello being a good blink target. You put them together with April, they're fun to blink, but geez, you blink them in this situation, and suddenly that's a lot of stuns, baby. Goes pretty well with like Ishtola Rule from the last set or whatever, because you can basically blink Donnie like every turn and stun 3 different guys. That's pretty wild. So there's things I do like about this, but again, I think that a 6 mana casting cost more or less takes it out of contention, but at least it does something. That said, let's look at the last of these, and this one is, another guy that costs 6 freaking mana, but not only does he do something, I think he does enough to almost justify his cost in this case. We got Raphael, Tag Team Tough. 6 mana, again, 4 and 2 red, for a 5/6 legendary mutant ninja turtle. Whenever Raphael deals combat damage to a player for the first time each turn, untap all attacking creatures. After this combat step, there's an additional combat step, son. Absolutely insane in Ishin, but also good in like Anzrag, like anything that wants to take extra combat steps. This kind of feels like an extra copy of Anzrag, like in some ways, right? So I kind of like that about it, man. You let Raphael through, you're getting a whole other combat step, so you better not let him through. But there's plenty of ways to get him through for sure. And if you just like, I don't know, engineer a way to give him trample or something like that, he is getting through. He already has menace, so it's kind of difficult to block him. And if your opponent only has like 1 creature on the table, it's basically bye at that point. Like they have to do something in response to him getting in the first place. So he might cost a lot of mana, but I think that basically Relentless Assault on a never-ending stick might be good enough. I mean, looked at through a certain lens, Homeboy kind of just says you get 2 attack steps every turn. That's absolutely insane, but we'll look at the last card we got to see previewed today, and that is Heroes and a Half Shell, which I think probably should have actually been the face commander for the commander deck, but what do I know? This is 5 mana, white, blue, black, red, green. That's all of them for a 5/5 legendary mutant ninja turtle with vigilance, menace, trample, and haste. Whenever 1 or more mutants, ninjas, and or turtles you control deal combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on each of those creatures and draw a card. I've heard of turtle soup, but I'd rather have keyword soup, and this has a pretty delicious one on it. But I also kind of like the fact that this could work in not Ninja Turtles decks, like one or the other. I'm playing a bunch of turtles, this is good. I'm playing a bunch of ninjas, this is good. If I happen to put together a mutant deck, I guess this works too, but it's kind of a Lord effect in some ways that draws an extra card every turn, and that could be pretty decent as a Wooburg commander, just not super broken. I do see why this isn't the face commander. They want you to be able to just pick 2 turtles that you like the most and make those your face commanders, and I think it's good to be able to do that with a property specifically like Ninja Turtles, because, some people don't like some turtles, some people love other turtles, and maybe you put Raphael and Donatello together, and they're your commanders, and you don't even care about Leonardo, which is probably what I'm going to be doing. But either way, they don't really work super well together, but we can make it happen one way or the other. I get, again, the mechanical reasons and the flavor reasons why this isn't the face commander. It just seems like it makes too much sense to be the face commander. But I guess it goes really well in the 99 of that deck for obvious reasons. But it's a pretty exciting card, and I guess it's kind of in some ways supposed to be the most hyped card of the day, which is why it's last. But we'll see how this thing actually fares in Commander, and if people do end up building decks with it as the general. That is Itsky Lowitsky, dudes and dudettes. Now, don't worry, this is not the official start of spoiler season. I'm pretty sure spoiler season doesn't officially start until sometime in mid-February for this set, so it's going to be a couple of months. They just wanted to go ahead and let us know it's coming and give us a few cards from it. Now, the next spoiler season actually starts, I believe, on October the 28th, and it's for Avatar: The Last Airbender. So we got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cards today, and the next spoiler set is Avatar: The Last Airbender Magic in 2025 and 2026. We all can't wait to get to Lorwyn, right? We agree on that. Lorwyn's going to be great, but to be honest, I can't wait for the TMNT set. I know it's not the best or most Magic the Gathering-esque property in the world, but it is one that I have to admit I kind of wanted a little bit because I'm still a child at heart. So I'm going to be into this set. I don't know how much of I'm going to end up buying or anything, but I will be a little nerd during spoiler season about it, so get ready for that. Anyway, y'all, subscribe for all the content coming up, not just Atlas spoilers and Turtle spoilers and all that, but again, Lorwyn, Strixhaven, all that's coming out. We've got a bunch of Spider-Man decks we still got to do. We got Pauper content, top 5 decks in Pauper in the next couple of days. Any of this sounds good to you, give the channel a subscribe and hit the button shaped like a thumb to let YouTube know you like this one. We also have a Patreon, just $1 a month to join up and vote on what content we do around here. That's why we're doing the Pauper video next. The patrons smashed it, man. They've voted for that like twice as much as any other thing in that poll. So people are really hungry, it turns out, for popper content. I didn't know. But either way, get into the Patreon if you want to help determine what even goes on around here. And I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love, be kind, and cowabunga.